I didn't really know how to express myself, or that it was possible for me to express my butchness and my masculinity until I booked this role and got to express this character. I feel like I kind of got to go back to high school in some ways and heal a part of me that felt like I had to perform in a certain way.
Kristen Maldonado here for Pop Culture Planet, where we cover the world of entertainment while shining a light on representation and inclusion. Today we are joined by a very special guest, Ari Notartomaso, who is a queer non-binary actor starring in Grease, Rise of the Pink Ladies. I cannot tell you how obsessed I am with this show. It's incredible, and we are going to be talking about everything from theater kid dreams to some Grease Easter eggs, and also just that power of representation that the show is bringing forward for young people. I cannot tell you how excited I am to talk with you. I feel like we're kicking off Pride perfectly. I'm obsessed with Grease, Rise of the Pink Ladies, and you just like stole a show.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been such a huge honor to, add to the Grease canon, and also like, especially along with the rest of the Pink Ladies, and who are now some of my dearest friends, to make it so special is just like, it's just incredible.
This is like your first lead television role. And obviously, like you said, continuing the legacy of Grease. So I want to know, like, what was it like booking something like this, and what was your reaction to joining this world?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually my first lead since high school.
Wow.
In a full production. And so it was certainly a shock. I was like, I have a really great support system, and so I knew that I was capable of doing it. I felt confident that I'd figure it out. But it was also a huge shift from being a musical theater major and being used to theater, where the audience is hundreds of feet away from you, to the world of TV and film. But it was especially since the set was so collaborative, there was like so much kindness and grace given to those of us who were new for the for the world of TV and film. So, but it ended up being just an incredible experience, and I learned a lot.
I was going to say, this show seems like a theater kid's dream, right? And as you said, you grew up doing musical theater. I'd love to go back a little bit. Like, did you always know you wanted to be an actor and a performer? Like, where did that love come from?
Yeah, my dad owns a record store, so I have been around music since I was born. And I did my first community theater production at age 6. So I've been doing theater. I think I did a theater production every single year since I was 6 years old, until the pandemic, until 2020. And then, of course, and then I started working professionally when I moved to New York, and did this show. So it's just been something that I've done my whole life. Done community productions, and went to school for musical theater at Penn State. I've been what I wanted to do for a very long time. But how I wanted to do that, especially like who I was and how I could bring myself, and especially my queerness, to different characters and stuff, was something that I wasn't sure of how to do until very recently.
How did you discover that?
Well, musical theater school, I'm very lucky that Penn State is not all about, wearing jewel tone dresses and like conforming very specifically to the gender binary, but there just really isn't as much representation, but really just space generally for especially intersectional queer folks, people of color who are also trans, or lesbians who are also gender nonconforming. It's just a very difficult place for queer people and any marginalized person to exist inside of. And so there has always sort of been an element of pressure to be a sort of digestible minority in just really any entertainment business. So it took a lot, especially during the pandemic. It really took a bit of space for me to self-reflect, and my incredible agents at KMR and their expertise and their support to finally allow me to really be able to see myself and in different characters and be able to explore that. And of course, Grease, whenever I first got the audition for Cynthia, I read the pilot and I was like, this person is exactly who I want to be playing on television. So yeah,
Wow.
It's, of course, like you said, it's musical as well. So it's a dream.
I love that. It's got all the elements. And you mentioned Cynthia, such a dynamic character. I cannot tell you, like, she's so hilarious. I can't tell you how many times I replayed that caca in my khakis scene. Like, oh my God. It was just so funny. But she also has these really great moments exploring her identity and sexuality. And I'd love to hear about how you like found Cynthia in your like discovery of like the character and like putting her together.
Well, two things. One, I will not take credit for the jokes for Cynthia's dynamism, because it was written by our incredible writers team, who, of course, their union is striking right now. We need them like so desperately, and this show is very complicated, and there's a lot of characters, and like any moment that you laughed because of Cynthia is because of a writer, like not because of, I'm not very funny in my own life, so we need them. So first there's that. In terms of like my personal identity and my experience as a gender nonconforming non-binary person, trans person, I didn't really know how to express myself, or that it was possible for me to express my butchness and my masculinity, until I booked this role and got to express this character. And now, of course, I identify as a butch lesbian, and I am very masculine in my presentation as a non-binary person. And so it's just been so interesting that I feel like I kind of got to go back to high school in some ways and heal a part of me that felt like I had to perform in a certain way. Of course, it's also the 1950s, so there's a whole other element of that that's very difficult. But for this character, it's sort of like me and Cynthia both got to learn from each other. There's so much that I got to share with her, and things that she has no context for that I do as a 25-year or 24-year-old queer person. But then there's also things that Cynthia had, and who she was and how she was herself, that the writers gave us so graciously, that I got to reflect back to myself. And now I feel like I've learned a lot from Cynthia, just as much from Cynthia as Cynthia's learned from me.
Oh, I love that so much. You know, there was something like, you know, as I'm watching the show, I'm like looking for like little Easter eggs, not even, I feel like, to just Grease and Grease too, but I felt like Cynthia sort of reminded me of Anybody's from West Side Story a little bit. I was getting like Bye Bye Birdie vibes from some of the, you know, like the telephone. So
yeah, the monster.
I love that. I think that's so awesome. And that's great that you were able to, like, you know, learn from each other within this character. That must be so exciting as, like, you know, your first big like main role out in the industry, and, you know, getting to have such a great meaty role. And on top of that, the vocals were vocaling. The musical numbers were incredible in here, and you're tackling these performances that are so full on, so creative, but also like all original music, which must be like another dream. Like, that's like, you know, originating these roles with new music by Justin Tranter, who is such a hit maker. What was that like? Did you have any favorite songs to perform?
Oof, that is such a hard question. There's two songs in the last episode. I mean, all three songs in the last episode that I get to sing. So those three songs were all just so special to me. And like, it was our last day in the recording studio when we recorded all three of them. And so it was just like banging out these songs, and I'm like just listening to them, and just the fact that we get to sing these songs in the first place, like, and then also that we're singing them for a cast album, Second Off, which has been a dream of mine since I was a child. And then also that these characters are also near and dear to us, and the music so beautifully reflects those characters so well. It's just so incredible. And also Justin Tranter, who I'm sure you've done your research, is like this incredible prolific writer of pop songs. So then the just the knowledge that they have in the music industry to bring that to, and I know that they're a lifelong fan of musical theater as well. So for them to bring all of their knowledge in all those areas, and then to open up the room and collaborate with everyone to make these musical numbers, the just so specific, each one, and like the references that are brought, it's just like, it's incredible. And it's been really awesome too to see like which numbers are resonating with people and how they're resonating with people. Like Crushing Me, which is a song that's very short. It's a duet between Cynthia and Nancy. And me and Trisha had so much fun. Like, it was sort of like, it felt like we're having a good time. Like, you know, we had no idea that it was going to have a moment on TikTok, and that like there'd be a lot of, you know, young lesbians and sapphics, and just generally just people who experience what it's like to crush on people who like relate to that song. It's a great surprise to always see how people feel about those songs in the way that we do as well.
The other thing is, I loved how much you guys are sharing behind the scenes and fun facts and like the TikToks and everything. Honestly, that's how I found out more about the show, and like was even more encouraged to check it out. So I just thought that was really powerful to be able to see like all of you are you know, you must have had like a lot of work going on, like not only filming the show, but filming all this great content for us to see after the fact. So y'all are killing it.
Yeah, it's really interesting how powerful the internet is and how it like affects the success of different shows, and like to see the like the amount of people watching the show because of the internet like is just much higher than I ever would have thought. I've had a TikTok for a while now, like since the pandemic basically. I was very bored, and I would record songs, like I would record singing different songs of musical theater songs and queer them, and like, you know, in ways that I thought like a song would make sense in this specific way. And there was a song that I sang, it was a Barbra Streisand song called He Touched Me, but it originally was She Touched Me. It was sung by a man, and the lyrics were He Touched Me or She Touched Me. And so I sang it back like to that original thing, and it had like a moment on the internet. And then I later learned that our casting directors had seen that video, and without knowing that it was the same person, watched my tape and was like, this, you know, this person is a great Cynthia, we'd love to cast them. And then they had watched this other video and were like, oh, like this person would be an awesome Cynthia, like this is our Cynthia. And then once they put the pieces together, they were like, wait, this is the same person. And so like the internet did have a piece of why I had booked this job. Like it was like it had a role even in me being on the show, let alone people seeing it. It's crazy.
Wow, that's incredible. See, that's a great didn't know story. And I mean, like you said in the finale, I mean, you kind of get the you're the one that I want kind of finale big number, which is like really cool.
I hadn't made that connection, but I love that. Yeah.
You mentioned, you know, Cynthia and Nancy. I've been dying to know that moment when Cynthia confides in Nancy about what she's kind of dealing with. You know, she writes something on a piece of paper, and then Nancy writes in the back. She goes, what was written? I've been dying to know.
I think I'm going to take that one to the grave. It was very, I mean, Annabelle gave us like a bunch of pitches, and then what me and Trisha did, it was, I think it was, might've been different for different takes. We tried out a few things to see what felt right, but we did settle on something. And unfortunately, I cannot tell you, because I mean, truly, I think so much of what I love about this queer storyline with Cynthia specifically is that there's so much that we don't have language for in the 50s that Cynthia probably wouldn't have been able to clarify for herself if she were having a conversation with us, and like what her labels would be. And so there's so much room for people to identify with the story and the different aspects of this character's life as a queer person in the 1950s. But there's so much that's up to interpretation. So, and that's just another aspect of the story that I feel like whatever you think that Cynthia and Nancy wrote is what they wrote for you, you know? Like whatever it needs to be for you is what it can be.
I feel you. And, you know, of course, speaking of just the Pink Ladies in general, you guys were so much the heart of this show that like, it was sort of like magic, the four of you together. And so I would love to know, like, how did you build up your bond? Like, what was it like on set?
Well, it's sort of impossible to be on any production that lasts a huge amount of time. We were out in Canada, in Vancouver, a place that most of us had never been, for 7 months. And so we just kind of had each other to do this absolutely insane project that was like, just took so much energy, so much time, so many hours, so much of ourselves that we put in these characters. It was kind of impossible for us to not bond very quickly. It was also like, I mean, a lot of us have a lot of things on our resumes for sure. But it was the first time that really any of us had ever done anything to that caliber. Except for Jackie Hoffman, who of course is an incredibly huge career, who, you know, all of us love her. But especially for like, you know, for the Pink specifically, like we were all sort of in this together in a way that it sort of made it impossible for us to not become fast friends.
And of course, there were so many great Easter eggs, like we mentioned, to Grease 2, to some other, you know, musicals of that time period. Did you have a favorite Easter egg, or maybe even one that people haven't really noticed yet?
That is such a good question. I'm planning on doing a watch through of the episodes now that we have all 10. So I definitely can come back to you for like a specific one that I love, but I will say after watching the whole series and then going back and watching the first two, the movies, Grease 1 and Grease 2, it's sort of like I'm seeing them through a different lens now. Like there's just so many moments that I didn't pick out in the first two movies as important, and just sort of like wrote them off. Like there's a line between Frenchie and Rizzo on the bed where they're talking about why Frenchie's called Frenchie, and they sort of make a joke about like, but I'm not going to say anything about it, and like we know what happened because they talked about it in our show. Like we actually know that. So I feel like the things that I'm the most excited about are the Frenchie Rizzo friendship. But there's definitely like so many more than that as well to see. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, I loved those like little throwing it back to the iconic characters from the original, but like the younger versions. There was also something I noticed with like, I forget what it was now, but there was like some kind of like little eye shape in like I think an animated part of Grease, and then I noticed that Trisha has like these eyes, the same eyes on like a whole like shirt that she's wearing, and I was like, I'm telling you, I did a huge deep dive.
So specific. I love that you noticed that. I'm sure that was intentional.
I'm sure, yeah, absolutely, it must have been, because there's so many great references to musicals at that time. If you could like see a crossover between Rise of the Pink Ladies and another musical, like what would you want to see?
Oh, a musical. I was thinking A League of Their Own show that's set. I think it's in like the late 40s or something. I just feel like that is a crossover that I need personally. But in terms of musical, that is such a good question. I mean, I personally hate Mr. Daniels. I don't know if you feel this way. But I hope I at some point would love for there to be a canonical overlay of Grease, Rise of the Pink Ladies, and Sweeney Todd, in which Mr. Daniels is a victim of Sweeney Todd.
Swing of the razor.
Exactly.
Something that I feel like I took away from the original Grease was sort of that like Sandy had to change who she was to fit in. And I never really liked that, but I feel like this show does the complete opposite and is literally about being your truest self and, that community and just rebelling against what's stereotypically like ladylike and things like that. And I just really resonated with those messages. And I'm just curious, like, what you hope young people take away from the show and from your character.
Yeah, I feel like young people are very regularly overlooked and seen as people to not be taken seriously, or people that just, they don't know what the real world is like yet, but they do. Children see the world in a way and young people generally like see the world in ways that adults can't anymore, because the messages that we've gotten about the world has been so heavy from so young. And so to me, my hope in young people watching is that they see this show and know that people actually see something about them and their thoughts and their feelings, and that they know that at least some adults don't see them as crazy or as this like new young generation that like we shouldn't listen to, or that they don't understand the world, because young people know themselves incredibly well and know the world so much better than most adults can see it. And so, especially with the queer storylines, I feel like it's just very important for young people to see themselves and then be able to share that and be heard. So yeah, to me, I think this show is about young people being listened to and supporting each other and uplifting each other, which is something that young people do very well. And I think adults are the ones who maybe have a hard time with that.
Just to wrap things up, what do you hope to see for Cynthia in a possible season 2?
I love so much how in our show we get to see Nancy and Jane and Olivia's sort of family life, especially Jane. And we don't really see Cynthia's home life. And I know things about it, given like the conversations that I've had with our showrunner and some of the writers. And I really hope that in a season 2, we get to explore more of that, because I think it's very interesting.
Ooh, I hope so too. I'm crossing my fingers. Thank you so much to Ari for joining me on this episode of Pop Culture Planet, and please check out the entire full season of Grease: Rise of the Pink Ladies, currently out on Paramount+. I need a second season, people, so get on it. For more Pop Culture Planet, you can check out the video podcast at youtube.com/kmaldo, that's KAYMALDO. You can listen to the audio version on your favorite podcast listening platforms, and get even more insight at our entertainment outlet, popcultureplanet.net. You can keep up with the podcast on social by following me at kmaldo everywhere or at Pop Cult Planet. You can also support the podcast by buying your own Pop Culture Planet merch at teespring.com/stores/kmaldo. If you enjoy the podcast, consider subscribing so you know when a new one is posted. Rate and review the podcast and share it with your fellow pop culture lovers. Thanks for listening. It's been a blast, and I'll catch you in the latest episode. Consider subscribing if you like my videos, and if you want to talk more TV and movies with me outside of the comments section, check out my Patreon at patreon.com/kmaldo. If you like this one, you can check out more of my videos right over here. See ya!